Hey everybody, Scotty here. I am solo for this week's podcast. Natalie is off on an excursion, not available to be here, but this is an interview that not only am I so excited about, but you got to hold on till the end. I'm literally in tears with my guest this week because we are celebrating Disability Pride Month. So this is the first of our series of Disability Pride podcasts. We're also going to reshare some other podcasts that we've done throughout the year that celebrate people with disabilities who are literally tearing up the world and rewriting the rules and creating abilities and possibilities for everyone, not just those with disabilities, but everyone else as well. So today's guest is Tiffany Yu. She is the founder of an organization called Diversability. She'll tell her story about her disability. She's very comfortable sharing the details of her life and her disability and how she's overcome the things that she's overcome and how she has created a life for herself that she never dreamed of, that she never thought possible. And as I listen to her, a couple of things go through my mind. One is that she is an educator and she is a solutions detective. She finds solutions to things, but she's able to pick things apart and figure out why they're not working and make them work. And the things that she will share in this podcast are things that you can apply to anything in your life, including being a better human to those who would benefit from your help and assistance and love. And so with that, let's go to the conversation with Tiffany Yu. Everyone, please welcome my very special guest today, Tiffany Yu, who is here to celebrate with us Disability Pride Month. And I have to confess, until I met Tiffany, I didn't even know Disability Pride Month was a thing. And now I see it all over all of my social channels. I hear people talking about it. We are going to have more podcasts this month, in the month of July, before Disability Pride Month is over, because people like Tiffany make me feel so inspired and so thrilled to be alive, to be doing the things that I'm doing, to see her inspire other people and empower other people to do the things they want to do is just incredible. Welcome, Tiffany.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Well, first of all, it's very good to see you. It's been too long. We worked together on a project about 4 years ago. I can't believe it was 4 years ago. And you inspired me so much then. And every time I see you in my feeds, I'm even more inspired. And I want to start with where your motivation came from to be an advocate for those with disabilities. And taking a little bit of a step back, talk about your Diversability, your company. What is Diversability?
Yeah, so first I'll just share a little bit of my why for your listeners in case they're not familiar with me. So at the age of 9, on a car ride home with my dad and a couple of my siblings, he lost control of the car and I acquired a handful of injuries and disabilities, including permanently paralyzing one of my arms. I broke a couple bones in one of my legs. So I was a temporary wheelchair user for about 4 months. And then much later, I'd be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, which is a type of mental health disability. And for the 10 plus years after I became disabled, I didn't really tell anyone about it. I think growing up as the daughter of Asian immigrants, I had internalized that I shouldn't share anything that might be seen as shameful. At the time, I thought maybe disability was shameful. The fact that my dad had passed away, perhaps maybe someone could interpret that meant there was some bad luck in my ancestral lineage. And I didn't really tell anyone about the car accident. I was essentially just hiding. And so it wasn't until I got to college, which is actually where the first iteration of Diversability came to be, where I got introduced to my first disability community. And that was working in the corporate world. I did a summer internship at Goldman Sachs, and I got introduced to these different employee resource groups or affinity groups that they have for their employees, for Asian employees, women employees, disabled employees, and our allies. And I thought, if a place like Goldman Sachs has a disability community, like where every place and every space should have something like this. Because meeting other disabled people made me realize that I didn't need to be so isolated or feel so excluded in my experience, which is kind of what that decade after I became disabled felt like. And in addition to that, not only could I find community, but a sense of pride and empowerment in a part of my identity that maybe a lot of other people assumed that I should feel shame about, which I then internalized. So that was the first iteration of Diversability. We were Georgetown University's first ever disability student club, and essentially with each stage of life I have evolved into. So we grew into like a meetup group for disabled young professionals when I was living in New York, and then started growing into different chapters around the country, to then kind of evolving and pivoting when at the start of the pandemic to say, what would it look like if we moved our community to virtual first? And we ended up growing 4 times during that period of time, because it made me realize that the key cities that we had been in perhaps already have a little bit of a semblance of an in-person disability community, or maybe more support services available. We once had a team member who there was only one stoplight in her entire city. What about if you're the only disabled person in your small town? If you have access to the internet, can you join our Facebook community, or can you join our leadership collective? So today we're a mainly virtual first community. We've got around 80,000 in our ecosystem, trying to support both the next generation of disability advocates, but also support more people on what we like to call the shame to pride transformation around a disability identity. And I love the fact that you opened saying that you weren't aware of Disability Pride Month. Even now, a lot of people are still newer to the concept of disability pride. And 17 years ago, when I first started to find my voice as an advocate, I've been disabled for almost 30 years now, but 17 years ago, it was still very much a lack of understanding and awareness that for those of us who have lifelong disabilities, I want to be the fullest embodiment of myself and be entrenched in community and culture.
So you said something really interesting that I think every woman certainly can identify with, and that is not talking about things or feeling like you need to hide or cover up things, or compensating for a shortcoming. And the world, unfortunately, has made us feel that way for a long time. I think we don't feel quite so much that way anymore. So you talked about the communities, but that helped you to get past that. But what was it inside you? What was the dialogue in your head that helped you to realize that I don't need to be ashamed of this. I need to move forward and live with it.
I would be remiss if I didn't double down on just the power of community. It's seeing possibility. It's seeing spaces that you didn't think you could belong in, and other people paving that way for you. But the internal dialogue, I saw this TED Talk from Brene Brown around shame. And she said, shame festers in secrecy, silence, and judgment. And so the way my brain works is I'm very task oriented. So I'm like, okay, what steps can I take to not have the things I feel shame about, not have judgment, silence, or have them feel like secrets? So there's a part of me that was like, I have a little bit of a social media platform. And I will share in full transparency, I don't know if you know this, Scotty, but before the emergence of TikTok, if I go back and I look at old Instagram photos of myself, I'm hiding my arm. I had figured out how to position it behind my hip in photos, or have it behind someone. And even during that time, I only started re-wearing a splint in 2019. So I know we met past that period where I did wear the splint, where now it was even more visible, is drawing attention to it. And I think about that 20-year period where, maybe I it's kind of like a retainer. You should have been wearing it, but after a certain point in time, you didn't think it was cool, or maybe you drool too much, or it gets too much attention or something, and you stop. So yeah, there was a turning point. I want to say there have been these little touch points along the way where I think I have the task-oriented version of me has said, okay, how can I not be silent about this, or and in some ways try to like reconfigure, like, okay, I still feel shame about it, but I'm going to post it anyway. Still feel shame about it, but I'm going to show it on video anyway. And then perhaps we call this like the mirror exposure effect. Probably by doing it over and over again, shame starts to lose its power over me. I think the biggest internal dialogue, though, was that I still use a lot of filler words. You probably heard them here in the edit. I also don't like the sound of my own voice. But I reminded myself that the message matters more than how self-conscious I feel about it. And there is a turning point where someone, and there's privilege in this as well, when someone goes from being like a patient advocate or a self-advocate to an advocate, which is now you are, yes, you are an expert in your own lived experience, but you're trying to bring other experiences into rooms that maybe other people might not be able to have access to yet. And so with that turning point to say, okay, I want to start a community, and what are the ways that we can democratize visibility? I think I had to swallow my own pride around the way my voice sounded or how I felt about it and say, I have a chance to be in this room. I'm going to use my voice if I have an opportunity to, and maybe I won't watch the recording afterward if I really feel that self-conscious about it. And I think, yeah, in some ways it's like, for me, it's always been like the do it before you're ready. And I think that has been what has driven so much of the things that I've done.
Do it before you're ready. Practice a lot. Do it a lot. Do a lot of photos, a lot of videos. Show your hand. I love that so much because it's, I'm confessing that I'm kind of lost in all of your words, holding on to each one because it's so meaningful to all of us to learn, to look at you and see what you've done and how much you've accomplished and how many people you've inspired. And what can I learn to overcome maybe the disabilities that are not quite so clear, not quite so obvious. A fear of, doubting yourself. I mean, I think we all carry a lot of that where we think we're not worthy, right? That self-doubt and imposter syndrome, I guess I call it. And thinking you see other people doing things and you think, oh, well, I could never do that. And why would you think that? And seeing you do the things that you do inspires me to think I need to step up and do those things that I'm afraid to do or I think I can't do. Let's talk about how you moved into, so you built this community and then you really moved into the public, doing TEDx, public speaking at conferences and to professional groups. Tell us about how you built this public persona and why.
I hid behind Diversability for a long time. And actually, I think what I feel proud of is that some people don't know I'm the founder of Diversability. And they'll say, oh, I've been following that account for years. I didn't know that you started it. And I think that's my overall dream, right? I don't want this to be necessarily the Tiffany show, but if I can show other people within the disability community the possibility of the opportunities that you can create for yourself. So I think that the personal brand journey really started in 2020 at the start of the pandemic when we couldn't host our Diversability events in person anymore. Now, I will share, I did, a couple of TEDx's before the start of the pandemic. We had this amazing feature from the Ford Foundation around that time as well. But I will also share that the Ford Foundation feature came from someone else saying my name in a room I wasn't in. I have another disabled friend who was very, very actively involved in the election cycle at that particular point in time and couldn't participate and put my name forward. And even most recently, I got to serve on the FIFA World Cup 2026 Accessibility Advisory Board. And my friend who works at FIFA put my name forward, right? And so I think about the ways who is saying your name in the rooms that you're not in. And so to go back to your question around the personal brand, I started posting on TikTok, and the original posts were showing people how I did things with one hand. And this can range from things like, how do you clasp a necklace? How do you drive? Which is how Scotty and I got connected. I still have the steering knob from the campaign that we did together. And then I got gifted another one. But yeah, how do you drive? And so I started making those types of videos. And after a certain point in time, while that's one form of advocacy, and I do think that it helped me connect with a lot of other people who have my injury, who didn't know, like, oh, I actually button my sweater this way, or I zip up my jacket this way. So we were all kind of sharing resources with each other. But that wasn't the original reason why I started Diversability or why I was growing as an advocate. So I started something called the Anti-Ableism series. This is December of 2020. And to me, this was just a short form video series on TikTok and now Instagram and YouTube about how one can better show up for the disability community. And this could range from things like, hey, Scotty, did you know that July is Disability Pride Month because it coincides with the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act? Or like, hey, Scotty, did you know that there are over 1 billion people globally who live with disabilities? Or, hey, Scotty, did you know that 70 to 80% of disabilities are not apparent? And so we get so fixated on people who have physical disabilities or the more visible disabilities, when really I would love to see more advocates who have non-apparent disabilities join our movement, right? And be part of the conversation that disability doesn't have a look. Someone isn't obviously disabled. You don't know if someone is obviously disabled. I remember that just being one part of the series too. And after posting that series for a couple of months, I got reached out to by a literary agent and then a publisher. And then I published a book, right? And so I just think about all of the ways that Tiffany showing up, being herself, has created so many interesting opportunities for me. And fascinatingly enough, after my book came out in October of 2024, I spent so much time promoting it. I'm so proud of it. It's called the Anti-Ableist Manifesto. It's coming out in paperback in October, currently on its 5th printing. Then I wanted something to do that wasn't the book. And that's when I started climbing. And so when we think about Tiffany the Advocate, and I'll kind of close with this, I see 5 pillars underneath there. And I think if your listeners take anything away from the conversation that we've had so far, it's that even as one person, you can make a difference. So I'm going to share these 5 pillars. And these are very specific to me and where I see my own spheres of influence and where I can make an impact. And perhaps the task for your listeners is for them to think about their own spheres of influence and where they think they can make an impact. So the first pillar is what I call community social health. That's where Diversability sits. It's helping disabled people find each other. The second pillar is education. That's where the Anti-Ableism series sits. That's where this book, that's where a lot of my public speaking is. It's how can we bring more non-disabled allies into this work? I would love you to show up for me. Even thinking about how me and Scotty got connected, it was through a friend I had in college. So again, saying my name in a room that I wasn't in. The third pillar is what I call economic empowerment. My background's in finance. I'm trying to think about how can I reinvest money back into the community. So whether that's through, we've always hired disabled people at Diversability. They come on for a trial period, see if they like how we work. We're remote first. Some people don't prefer that. We're also asynchronous, so work on your own terms. Some people also don't like that. But everyone is paid because we don't believe free labor doesn't pay your rent or pay your bills. We also run a micro grant for disability projects, $1,000 every single month to a disability project around the world. To date, it's now I think it's 113,000 that we've awarded to 114 projects in 20 countries. And then the fourth pillar is what I call civic engagement. These are advisory boards that I serve on, FIFA World Cup. I served on one for LA28 around workforce development. I'm on one for NIH. And then the last one is what I call joy. It's where can Tiffany take off her advocate hat and just be? That's where the climbing fits in. We talked very briefly about surfing. That's kind of my newest special interest. But with the climbing, no one knows who I am. And I've been calling it like incognito or anonymity, but where are the places where no one is expecting anything of me? I mean, you're expecting me to climb, but like no one is expecting Tiffany the advocate.
I think when there are very few expectations, you also have the freedom to fail. You have the freedom to quit. You have the freedom to take a break and not feel like you're failing other people because you're just taking care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So before we get into climbing, because I do want to talk more about that, that is like, okay, I'm going to just leave that right there for a second. What do you want people to take away from your book, The Anti-Ableist Manifesto? First of all, tell us what that means. What is anti-ableist?
Yes. So ableism, we'll start with the definition of ableism. Now, I want to share the first time ableism was ever used was 1981. And so I want to share that because I'm born in the 1980s and I don't think I'm that old. And so we haven't had language. It's new, right? And so if that's the first time you've heard that term, it's okay. So ableism, similar to sexism, racism, it's a system of oppression. But ableism is a system of oppression where we devalue someone based on the way their body and or mind works. Now, you'll notice that in that longer definition, I haven't mentioned disability, but if you want a more simpler definition, you could say it's the devaluing of disabled bodies and or minds. Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly enough, part of why I called it the devaluing of bodies and or minds that are different is we see the devaluing of women's bodies. We see the devaluing of Black bodies. We see the devaluing of our minds of women's minds based on the pitch of our voice, coming back to this thing about me being self-conscious about my voice and people making assumptions about me, and that's where you see different systems of oppression intersect. So ableism, the devaluing, disabled bodies, disabled minds. Anti-ableism is then what are the active systems, processes, thoughts, attitudes that I can put into place where we're not actively devaluing someone. So even in the context, and my favorite way to think about this is, can Tiffany or whoever person who has XYZ disability show up in a space and not have to encounter what I call access friction, which is maybe I have to give someone a heads up that I'm coming. I share an example in the book where I wanted to go to a pottery class. Now, I can't spin a pottery wheel the same way you can, and I'm not even sure if you can do it with one hand. So in that story I shared in the book, I asked my friend who's organizing. They said they didn't know. I reached out to the studio. I never heard from them, so I decided not to go. Now, I did get someone come to me saying, well, you just should have showed up and hung out anyway. But there's something that you feel when you show up in a space and you can't participate in the same way. And actually, I had to catch myself of this recently where I have a friend who is a wheelchair user who was coming to adaptive surfing, but we never went at the same time. And so I kept inviting them to come join every time I was coming, but they're recovering from something where they actually can't surf. And they were like, oh, sometimes I come and hang out, but you feel something when you can't get into the water at an event that's supposed to be meant for people with all different types of disabilities. So essentially anti-ableism is how can we ensure that people don't have to encounter friction when they go and want to participate in this. If I can just one sentence, I want people to take away hope. Hope that building the world that I have spent the last 17 years trying to advocate for is possible. And I think we are on the cusp of it. We are on the cusp of it in the sense that this, and I'm pointing to a stack of books right behind me, these are all written by disabled authors, published by big publishers. A couple years ago, that would not have happened, right? And so literary-wise, we're seeing that. I think about Marissa Bodie, who was in Wicked. On the big screen film, we're starting to see that shift. How much more visibility the Paralympic movement is getting. This is all part of this broader cultural shift. So I hope we can feel hope that building a disability inclusive world is possible. And there is at least one action that you can take no matter who you are, that I do believe that you can learn something new and have some action that you can take.
So now let's talk about climbing. We're going to, and I have another question that comes back to the anti-ableist manifesto, but I want to talk about climbing now, and then we'll come back to that. And that is, so you have started climbing. Why did you start climbing?
First, I will share that I have an entire TED Talk about how traumatizing my gym class was for me growing up. I was not aware of adaptive sports. I had to get dressed for a PE class, physical education class. No one wanted me to be at. And again, it reminds me of like showing up at a space you can't participate in the same way. And depending on what sport it was, they would tell me it was just okay to sit on the side. So I'd get dressed, sit on the side. And I have a line in the talk where I said, I sat on the sidelines of the gym and I sat on the sidelines of life. And I share that because in some ways I feel like I'm in my redemption era of wanting to rewrite a story I'd believed for so long that I wasn't an athlete. So now we come to climbing. I have memories of being an 8 or a 9-year-old girl at my friend's birthday party at a rock climbing gym. So many birthday parties at rock climbing gyms when you're a kid. I don't know if you have any of those memories, but I have so many memories. And I was one of those kids where you would climb up to the top and then you're, supposed to come back down with it and start climbing horizontally across the top. Just, a kid being a kid. So after the book came out, and over the past couple of years, to be fully transparent, I've been on a journey of re-exploring all of the things that 9-year-old Tiffany loved doing and rewriting a new story of finding what that's like in this current body. So I loved biking as a kid. I relearned how to bike. I entered a pageant. I was California Miss Amazing for a year, 2019. I had artwork drawn on my splint, and I couldn't wait to tell people the story behind that artwork. And then I showed up at a climbing gym. So I started climbing. So rewind a little. I had planted a seed that I wanted to get back into climbing. I was at an event doing a book signing that was kind of like a disability fair. It was called the Disability Fall Festival. And there was a rock climbing gym. It's portable with a large truck. And the person who ran it, his name is Wayne. Shout out to Wayne. And he came to my signing. He picked up my book and he goes, I'm a huge fan. And I said, oh, you're running the climbing. I'm like, I actually want to get into climbing. And he was like, I'm going to send you all of the adaptive climbing clinics that are happening in LA. He sent me 3 of them at the time. I think now there are 4 to 5. Pretty much almost every single climbing gym will have an adaptive climbing clinic, or you should ask them for one if you are someone who's listening to this. And if you're someone who loves to climb, come and volunteer and belay with us because many of us don't boulder. We'll top rope. So I look up the different climbing gyms. Now I'm in East Culver City. There's one in Pasadena. There's one in Torrance area. And then there's one in Sawtell. And only if you're in LA will you know what any of those mean. But essentially, I'm saying they're all kind of equidistant far from each other. The closest one to me, and then there was one in like Lincoln Heights. The closest one to me, I then, didn't see anything on their Instagram talking about their adaptive climbing. So I was like, maybe they're not doing it anymore. So I went to Wayne and then I tried to email them and then the email bounced. And I was like, maybe these are all signs that I shouldn't go to climbing. And I think about, Scotty, how you said to me that I'm inspiring you to try the things that you couldn't do. My internal dialogue is I can't. That is still something I'm working to unlearn. So I was trying to find all these excuses why I shouldn't show up to the adaptive climbing clinic. And finally, Wayne said, I called the gym. I talked to Jake. It's still going. I'm going to show up with you. So I show up. I say hi to Jake. And then I did my first climb. And then Jake, who used to be a former competitive athlete, he's a leg amputee. He goes, I think you could be competitive if you want to. Now, I saw that last year, the national championships for climbing were in Oakland. I live in LA. Super, super easy flight. Maybe too easy. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to show up. I had no idea what competition climbing was going to be like. And to be totally transparent, many of our gyms are not really equipped for competition climbing. Essentially, competition climbing is like the top rope length, but boulder style. So it's an overhung wall. So I get last at the national championships last year and I said, ooh, that was fun. you know, exactly like you said, Scotty, you can try new hobbies. You don't have to be good at them. So I started getting emails being like, welcome to Team USA. And I said, hey, am I supposed to be getting these emails? They said, oh, actually, if you are in the top 10, you kind of get put on something called the National Development Team. So it's a waitlist system where if the top 5 athletes aren't able to make it to a competition, they'll go into their waitlist. So last season, out of the 4 competitions that year, I got to compete in 3 of them, including the World Championships in Seoul, South Korea, which I had never been to South Korea. So I'm getting to travel to incredible places around the world. The climbing community is so supportive. They're really excited about more athletes getting to try climbing. And so after last season, I'm now 9th in the world according to the current world ranking. And paraclimbing will be introduced in LA 28, which is where I live. So we'll see what
So you
happens.
are now an official member of Team USA of the 2028 Paralympics.
Not yet. So the qualifications will probably start in 2027.
They'll start
And
next year. Okay.
yes, but
But
as
that
of
is,
right now, I get to rep. I get to rep Team USA at international competitions. But it's a different, and you and I were talking before we started recording. It is such a grueling process to even get to the Paralympics. So, and there's so much that goes into it. So even the fact that I get to show up at these competitions, I'm so grateful. I will also say, which is my personal fun accolade, is that I'm currently the only single arm female competitive climber in the world. There are 3 on the men's side. It's fun. It's reconnecting me with my younger self. And I will probably get a message at least once every couple of weeks from someone who has my injury who never thought that climbing could be for them. Or from parents who have kids who have my injury, where the doctors will tell us, those who have a paralyzed arm, that climbing and swimming are the best rehab.
wow.
But the doctors will tell them, but are not aware of where to send them, right?
Mm.
So now I even told my doctor, because my doctor works with a lot of kids who have brachial plexus injuries. That's the name of my paralyzed arm. She's like, now we have someone that we can help direct them to go climb. Because the thing is, with my injury, and this is what actually happened to me probably, you can get really disempowered with the way that your arm works or it doesn't work. So then you don't want to use it anymore. But if you are in a sport where you literally are like, I got to use any part of my body I can to stay on this wall, my paralyzed arm has gotten so strong in the amount of time. And I actually feel excited from a rehab perspective that I'm like, this is better than PT. And it's fun. You feel like you've achieved something once you reach the top of the wall. So,
You are not
uh,
going to be the only woman in this sport for long. You know why?
why?
Because women are going to see you and they're going to say, "Oh, I should try that."
Yes.
And
Can I share a stat with you?
sure.
The stat is that 90% of disabled girls and women do not participate in any physical activity. And I was that person for 20 years. When we met, Scotty, I would not even recognize myself. I cannot believe that I'm on Team USA for right now. I cannot believe that I am going on a surfboard. Before this year, I could not submerge my head underwater without holding my nose. Um, I ran a half marathon earlier this year. And 20 years ago, I tried to join my high school's track and field team. And the warm up was to run a mile and I quit. And so I'm rewriting. I'm rewriting that story. And I hope all of us get to rewrite and get our own redemption era. And yeah, I will say I will feel a little sad when I can't say that I'm the only. But that's the point, right? Is I
It
want
is the
more
point, and it's
people.
the best thing when you're the only one there. It's so hard because you have no one to, backstop you. You have very few people who know what you're going through, to lean on, to help you, to get advice from, to see how they're solving that problem. Sometimes it's the one who just walked in the door who's like, "Oh, that's how I've been doing this for years," and you're like, dang, I wish I'd known that a decade ago, right? And being in that space with other people, whatever it is that you're doing that is new and meaningful and challenging, to be in that space with other people means everything.
Yeah.
So you won't be alone for long.
Yeah. And I will also share too the fascinating thing about these climbing competitions. I'm in a space with hundreds of disabled people. If you're not disabled, you're actually you're the minority in that space. That's been fun too. Yeah. And I also love that even in my late 30s, you can reinvent yourself. You can find a new hobby. You can, yeah,
I think you could do it into your 40s and 50s too.
that's true. That's true. I don't have that lived experience yet, but when I get there,
You will. You
I
will.
will.
And it's I look at people like Martha Stewart, who I guess she's in her 80s and like reinvents herself every decade and doesn't let the mistakes that she's made hold her back. And I mean, she's not everybody's cup of tea, but she's pretty inspiring for the things that she's been able to do and continue to do. And then I have a friend who's a para triathlete who's, has competed over and over and over again against all odds and made incredible strides, not only for her own self and for her team and the guide that she works with, but also for other blind para triathletes who never thought they could, ride a bike when you're blind, swim when you're blind, run when you're blind. Like all those things seem so dangerous. And yet that's what she does. You've been very clear about what change looks like for you. You're now doing things that you never thought you could do. And you're actually targeting things that you felt held you back. And now you're rewriting that. What does change look like in our society, in our world, for people with disabilities to become more a part of our overall culture? What does that look like?
The number of times that I have told someone that I want to do something and their first reaction is, how are you even going to do that? It sounds dangerous. I think it's kind of rewriting that narrative where, let me try. I know the extents of my body. There are on USA Parasurfing, there's a blind surfer, and I find myself being like, oh my gosh, you have to be so in tune with the water, right? But they are an elite athlete at that particular level, right? They're on Team USA for that. So I think that's part of the rewriting of our society, is that my hope is that I can exist in this body, and the first reaction isn't, oh, you shouldn't do that, or how are you even going to do that? It's, can I have the spaciousness to even try? And this ties into, I think, probably the thing that I hope one of the takeaways, which is the assumptions that we make about disabled people based on simply what we're assuming about about the assumptions we make about their disability experience. Mm-hmm. And this is something I call the assumption funnel. And I'll just share two examples that will help highlight it. So the assumption funnel is we make an assumption about someone's disability, and then we take an action that actually reinforces the assumption. So an example could be like, Tiffany can only climb with one arm, and so I think it's dangerous, so I don't think she should climb. We're not going to have an adaptive clinic at our climbing gym, so Tiffany doesn't climb. Or it could be, I don't know how Tiffany is going to write a book because she can only type with one hand, so I'm not going to give her a book deal so she doesn't write a book. Or I don't know how someone who's blind could be an engineer, so I'm not going to make the resources or the training accessible for them so they don't become an engineer. I have a friend who was the first nurse in the state of New York to be a wheelchair user. And the ways she had to advocate, the ways people told her that she couldn't be a nurse because she was in a wheelchair to get her education. And then during COVID, she had a level of compassionate care that none of the other nurses had, right? People were coming in with acute situations that she understood, and she could bring that expertise. And I was so proud to see her. I think she got like $1 million donation or something on some TV show. It was very cool to watch. Anyway, that's why I'm so proud of our community. But it's just like I think about the tagline of my book, one part of it, the first part is smashing stereotypes. What are the stereotypes that people are making about us that limit us, right? Tiffany in gym class. Tiffany, Tiffany can't, I don't know, Tiffany can't be in this sport, so we're going to put her on the sidelines so she doesn't play that sport. I cannot believe that it has only been 10 years since I first discovered adaptive sports. And I am in my late 30s, right? It took me 20 years to even know that there were options available for me, right? So I think that is part of the change. And it's these small slights. Like I remember when I moved into a new place in Los Angeles, I was with with the person I was dating at the time. We were living together, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to assemble these shelves that we just got." And he said, "How are you even going to do that?" Right? And it wasn't meant to be like I'm doubting you. It was meant from a caring place, but it's when I continue to get questioned over and over and over again about the how, then I start to wonder if I can even, right? And that's what's so fascinating about the time that we're in, is that not only are we as disabled people expert life hackers, the pandemic taught us that we can figure it out. And I hope no matter who you are, we figured out how to work remotely if that's what we needed to do. We figured out how to be on video calls and have captions on them and record them. It's so much more advanced. Like, I don't know when you started your podcast, but to me, the barriers to entry of starting a podcast prior to the start of all of these virtual tools, I would have not even known how to start. Now you could just hit record and then upload it to a platform, right? So yeah, that was a little bit of a long-winded way, but I wanted to kind of bring in something you said around, your blind friends and them trying different sports. We figure it out and we understand ourselves best. And how can we get to a place where people trust that in us as well? And I'll close by saying that I think that's what part of this latest chapter has been for me, which is, where are the places that I can just be? And one of the places, yes, surfing, yes, climbing. I started going to these neurodivergent socials that are happening here in LA. And some days I feel like I want to talk to people, and some days I just want to sit in the corner and make art. And I just went to my third one, and it's the same group of people who go every time. Sometimes we decide to exchange contacts. Sometimes we don't, because we know we'll see each other next month, and that's okay. And I just love how in that space we can just be. And that is a term that's called access intimacy. It was coined by Mia Mingus, but access intimacy is essentially what happens when you remove all the access friction. But that's the change, which is, I think again, that's where me being transparent about how my internal dialogue starts with I can't. And so much of that was ingrained by other people telling me I couldn't. And so now it's the rewriting. And so part of the change is, how can we bring our allies in to rewrite that story as well, so that Tiffany doesn't continue being the only.
So let's talk about allies, because whether or not people are allies, they definitely need to be aware, and everyone needs to be a little more educated. What do you say to people who maybe are just ignoring the reality and looking the other way, to those who want to help but don't know how? They don't know what to say. It can be very uncomfortable, because you never know how somebody's going to react, especially if you as a person who maybe doesn't have a disability, or doesn't have a seen disability, or recognized as something that they recognize. It can be very uncomfortable as you're recognizing, oh, this person is doing, has this issue or this thing that I don't really understand. So you start to recognize it. And then then you kind of get paralyzed. Should I say something, or, should I help her? Should I not help her? Will that insult her if I try to? So what's your advice in that instance? I think that's a big part of what stymies the process.
I even think just saying it out loud to say, hey, I'm newer to this conversation. So let me know, feel free to let me know if I say anything out of turn. Or I really love the phrase, let me know if you need any support. And I actually just posted about this online. So let me know if and the context matters too. So if it's a stranger, let me know if you need any support is a statement. I don't have to respond to you if I don't want to. And I also know you proactively are there, that if I do come to you and I need support, I can tell you specifically how. That second part about specifically how to help is really important. Now, I will also share that there are some people where let me know if you need any support, especially if it's a friend, might be too broad. Some people who are neurodivergent, what would be super helpful for them would be like, hey, I'm coming over to, or hey, I just sent you a DoorDash gift certificate. Or hey, would it be helpful if I came by to wash your dishes or do your laundry? And those are very specific, right? In that context, you're not going over to a stranger's house. That's someone you know, right? And you're trying to figure out how best to support them. The other thing I'll share is that discomfort never killed anyone. Sometimes we'll do the exercise where we ask people to cross your arms, and then we'll say, cross them the other way. That feels uncomfortable. Or put on your pant leg, the other leg first, right? It feels uncomfortable. And you're laughing, right? And that's how I want the allyship journey to feel like. We're both co-creating an experience together so that we can both enjoy it, right? Now, I also want to share, in part one of my book, I do talk about inclusive language. Language is where allyship starts, but I don't want us to get caught up there, right? If our discomfort starts with language, we're not going to get to the more actionable parts of actually supporting disabled people's livelihoods, making sure they have the same equitable opportunity to go to World Cup games or concerts or other things like that. I did mention this. If you're a Swiftie, you give a plug to a Swiftie, but I didn't even need to mention Taylor Swift. But I have an example in the book where I went to a Taylor Swift concert, and no matter who you were, you could swap out your ticket for an accessible ticket, and you would get an unobstructed view in that section. Now, it's very specific to the stadium that I went to in Los Angeles, but how great is it if you're not able to stand for long periods of time and everyone else is standing? And now I get to enjoy it in the same way, right? I notice I digressed again a little bit, but I think that, interestingly enough, when people ask me, who is my book for, I tell them these are people who might be newer to disability and want to show up better for the community, but don't know where to start. And you almost use the exact same language in the question to me. Now, say you don't have the spoons or the energy or the capacity to read a 250-page book. I'll give you a secret, which is the title of every chapter is the takeaway from the chapter. The chapters also average about 7 to 8 pages. I tried to make it digestible. And within every chapter, there is an outlined box with tips and tricks, and then there's a shaded box with reflection questions. So if you're someone who's like, okay, I just want the takeaways, go check out the preview online. Sometimes you can preview the book before you get it. Take a preview at the table of contents, and that's the takeaway. Say you want to dive deeper, but you don't have a copy of the book, which of course you can check out from the library. You can go do an online search. And then it is shared in a couple places online, but we have something called the Anti-Ableist Manifesto art. It's introduced in the conclusion of the book, but the art is something that you can hang on your wall, and it's got about 30 statements on there, and the statements all correspond with chapters in the book. So, there are statements on there that say things like disability is not a bad word or a bad thing, hire us, interrupt microaggressions, use your privilege, other things like that. And then you're like, okay. And one of the things that came up in our conversation is, as we think about how we can build what I would call like an accessibility first culture, it can be so easy to get overwhelmed, and overwhelm can lead to inaction. And so how can we make this digestible enough that your overwhelm can lead to action? And maybe this is something as simple as If you are a podcast host and you are cutting up your pieces for social media, now you can click a button to add the captions. Make sure you check them and edit them if you need to. And then you published it and you made it possible for people who perhaps are on a busy train or forgot their headphones, or maybe you are deaf or hard of hearing, access the content. And so the other thing we share too is that we will all join this disability community if we are to live the beautiful, full extent of our lives. For me, I joined when I was 9. People may join when they're later as our bodies move through its different chapters. And so if we prioritize accessibility now, when we join, not only do we know we have community available for us, but we won't experience the same level of friction that so many of us have been fighting for so long. So if it's something we can do, and I will say I'm still learning too. And part of why I asked if I could do that call-in earlier in our conversation is because sometimes it feels uncomfortable when someone says, hey, by the way, is there something you said, could be leaning into some harmful assumptions about the community or might be outdated language. But then I remind myself, ooh, someone trusted me enough to share that information with me. And if it was like even a simple DM to be like, hey, this thing that you posted, just wanted to give you a heads up, we don't really use this language anymore. I'm like, oh, I can literally just go and edit it, right? In those instances, sometimes it can be just as easy to edit. Like sometimes they're the more egregious things, right? And those are the things we're trying to change the infrastructure around. Yeah. But that's why I'm just like, okay, if someone called me in about my language on a post or somewhere, literally swallow my pride, go and edit it, and it's done.
It's how we learn.
Yes.
It's how we learn. And I'm going to say that, in my opinion, the greatest reason to embrace disability, to embrace accessibility and bringing people into our greater world is because we get to know people like you. And you're just such a bright and shining, happy, lovely person to be around. And I smile every time I open my social media and you're there. And I just love so much the things that you're doing. And you make our world better for all of us, Tiffany.
Thank you.
So you can find Tiffany. I'm going to cry, so I'm going to try not to cry. You can find Tiffany at I'm Tiffany Yu on Instagram and TikTok. Where else can we find you?
My website is tiffanyyu.com. If you want to check out the book, you can check it out from the library in print, audio, or ebook, or whatever your favorite retailer is.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here. Happy Disability Pride Month. I hope that you climb all the walls and have all the fun and surf all the waves this month and every month, Tiffany. It's so good to see you. I hope to see you again IRL very soon.
For sure. Thank you.
Wow. If there's one person in the world who can leave me feeling both inspired and that I'm not doing enough and that I need to do more, it's Tiffany. It has been such a thrill not only to work with her in the past. I'll leave a link below to the project that we did with Tiffany so you can see that video. But to get to know her in that project and then watch her go on to join Team USA, to conquer the things that she's conquering, to climb these concave rock walls, the things that even truly physically strong, able-bodied or fully able-bodied people might struggle with, and she's doing it. It really shows you how much that determination and the critical thinking behind that determination can change anything. Well, happy Disability Pride Month, everybody. It goes on till the end of July, and that's something we are going to be celebrating in our next podcast. We're going to talk with Liv Lee, who you may know from the Electric Duo and also from A Girl's Guide to Cars. And we have a couple of other surprises for you throughout the month as well. Thanks for joining us. This is What Drives Her, the podcast from A Girl's Guide to Cars. My co-host, Natalie, is out this week, so I'm here with you, but Natalie is also our producer. Our podcast is edited by Steph Howard, music by Embado Elements. Be sure to subscribe. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at our site or over at YouTube. Thanks a lot, everyone. We'll see you next time.